But the other thing we want to talk about today was, it's a bit of a sensitive subject to some people, but RX, intermediate, scaled. Okay, so we have introduced the intermediate category, which for me, it needed to happen because we need to clear up the scaled category, to leave the scaled category for scaled athletes, okay? We'll talk about that in a second. The problem was, you create an intermediate category and people are going to drop down to that who comfortably were RX athletes before, and it's that feeling of, okay, I can't do 10 ring muscle ups, so I'm not RX, I'm intermediate. And this is the problem we're getting all the time, is where do you sit? So we've put our intermediate category combined with the RX, so we will make sure all our qualifiers are accessible, but they will test the fittest, so the best athletes will finish the chipper. They'll get to the end of the workout, they will then sit at the top of our leaderboard and they'll be invited to compete RX. The intermediate athletes will get quite far through the workout, they'll get to a point that's maybe a sticking point, so they will then rank next on the leaderboard and they will compete against each other. So we'll have the RX invites, the intermediate and the scaled to do their own workout, and that's separate. For you guys, where do you see, what is scaled? Like, what are we talking about with scaled?
I think for me, it's certain movements that you should not be able to do if you're entering a scale competition. Your things like your ring muscle ups, your bar muscle ups, butterfly pull-ups, butterfly chest to bar, all those sort of things for me are not a scaled athlete. I know how long it took me to learn butterfly. As soon as I could butterfly, I was already in RX categories, going through competitions and things, just purely on kipping alone. So I don't think anybody in a scaled category should be coming up and doing those things, just as much as I don't think anybody should be coming to a scaled category on a 24-inch box and rebounding the box jumps from side to side if you're doing box jump overs. I think there's certain things that need outlining as what is and what isn't scaled. I think that's what we need to look at.
You also have an athlete that can do all those things but can't do double unders, so they think they're scaled, and for me they just need to go away, get the double unders, and they're not a scaled athlete. If you can't do double unders, that's a chink in your armour. But for me, if you can do ring muscle ups and handstand walks, and I've seen people, and you can't do double unders, then no, you need to practice them double.
Yeah, and just to play devil's advocate, there are anomalies, obviously there are anomalies. There could be, I'm from an athletics background, so box jump rebounds was absolutely fine for me, but if I could do them but couldn't do anything else, then fair enough. But most of the time,
you're talking on a percentage of movements that you can do as an RX athlete, I think, and I think we need to distinguish what that percentage of movement is as RX. But when people are throwing around 85 kilo snatch complexes in a scaled competition, yes, you might come from a lifting background, but there's an element of a lot of CrossFit experience in there to be able to do that as a complex as well. And I think they're the things that people need to be thinking about when they're entering.
And it is really, really difficult to distinguish, because, I mean, I've had the situation before where people have called other people out on Instagram and Facebook and they've messaged the Castle Games saying, look, I've been through this person's Instagram, they are not a scaled athlete, they are RX. People do it. And I can see why, because there is that confusion, and some other comps, they have blurred the lines. And there are anomalies. There can be females who were gymnasts and they can walk in their hands all day. Doesn't necessarily make them an RX just because of that. But if they can also do double unders, and they can do, if they're RX in open workouts, then yes, you are an RX athlete with some weaknesses. But there are anomalies. There can be someone who can power clean. I've seen a female power clean, I think it was in the qualifiers last year. She was hitting 80 kilo power cleans, but she was a big girl. If she was on a journey of losing weight, she couldn't do double-footed burpee jumps. There has to be some element of, yes, you can do something, you can have anomalies, but if you're RX in the open, you need to be competing RX.
Yeah, if you can look at a list of movements and you can look at that as percentage of those movements, how many of those movements can I complete at RX, they're the things you should be considering if you're a scaled athlete. It blurs the lines a little bit when we start doing team comps, and I've drafted in my mate because we've got nobody else to put in, but he can do X, Y and Z RX. Well, then he's an RX athlete. He's not a scaled athlete. You need to look somewhere else and draft in another scaled athlete.
Well, I think we had that situation this year in terms of, like, we had 2 female athletes who had competed at our finals RX, and they went with 2 scaled males because they said they balanced each other out. But unfortunately that's not true, because when it comes to butterflying pull-ups, and you can hold on and butterfly 30 pull-ups, then unfortunately it doesn't matter whether your team balances out as scaled, because those individuals are helping you. They're hitting big numbers where it's scored individually. And it is really difficult. And one thing, like, we do understand that it's difficult for people to select the category, but that's why we've put the intermediate in, because
having the same leaderboard, having the same leaderboard is going to solve a lot of that.
Yeah,
because unless you're sandbagging the qualifier workouts to drop into the intermediate, and if you're giving it full tilt, then you should qualify where you qualify, and you shouldn't be fighting around people. What they have, like Vane Hills, they've had it down for a long time, you know, where you put your seeding results in there. We had a really positive response. Like, there's 2 negative comments, but like loads and loads of positivity around combining those categories, because you put an intermediate category out there separate. Who is intermediate? Like, where does that, like, I can do ring muscle ups and handstand walks, but my burpees and thrusters are embarrassing. Does that mean that I'm intermediate? No, I'm just terrible at burpees and thrusters, and I'm lazy. I don't want to do burpees and thrusters. And like that, like, you have to...
You're blurring the lines even more by doing that. So we're blurring the lines on scaled, saying a percentage of RX has to be done, but then if you go in intermediate, you're going to find another percentage of movement standards as well that need to be done. And I think that's where you're going to blur it even more.
Yeah, and I think everyone's goal, for me, it's odd, because when I started CrossFit, my goal was to RX things, and if I wanted to do a comp, I wanted to go and try and be an RX athlete. So for me, having an RX intermediate means I can enter it. Yes, great, if I hit RX, brilliant, but if not, I'll qualify intermediate, hopefully. But I'm definitely not scaled, and I think that's how people need to look at it.
I would rather finish mid-table than win the scaled in the intermediate, and then I'd rather finish bottom of the RX than win the intermediate. It's like, just try and get in the highest category you can, you know, and do yourself proud.
I think that's where people as well need to see it as a progression. So we see it quite often where, even right back, we've seen people start from the teens, go from teens almost to scaled. Now they could go to intermediate, then they could go to RX, and it's that progression. You shouldn't be going back and trying to do the same one over and over again, because in your training you need to be pushing on. And there are different things. There's always anomalies. There's people who have mobility issues, there are people who have things, there is restrictions, but I think you should see it as that pathway. Definitely,
because you would start as a scaled athlete in your CrossFit journey. As you get coached and move along, then you want to get to an RX athlete. I'd say, I don't know, 2, 3 years, 4 years, whatever that takes, but you have to be constantly training and progressing.
And I think another thing though, people like, there are people out there who feel like it's almost an entitlement to compete. Like for me, I had to graft really hard to make my first comp, and I think our qualifiers are set that it should be an achievement. And I think I've seen people who've entered the Castle Games multiple times and not qualify, and then when they finally have, that's been a huge achievement because they've qualified, they've earned their spot. And I think it shouldn't be like, oh, I want to compete, so I know I'll drop down, do the scale, get a comp in, and then I'll move back up. I don't think it should work like that.
It's improvement on the most basic level. It's, can I get into that category? No. Okay, I'll go back and have another go the following time. I'll keep going back and I'll keep going back. As my fitness improves, as my lifting improves, my gymnastics improves, I'll eventually make it. But I think people shy away from that a little bit. They don't push that a little bit harder every time, and do go for, it's easier just to go for scaled.
Yeah, definitely. And we're not talking about everyone. I mean, the majority of people think the same as that. And I think the problem I get is I get sometimes some pretty abusive messages on Instagram and email calling us out. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about these people? And all we can do is, like, we're putting in place, if you've ever qualified RX for a final, you can never enter the scaled comp again. We put that in place. And this year we've looked at the Open as well. And if you're a male coming top 2,000 in the Open in the UK, then you can't enter scaled. If you're a female coming top 500, you can't enter scaled. Because there are people who've entered our scaled final, stood on our podium, and then come crazy high in the UK. And like, there's a guy who came top 500 in the UK who was in our scaled. Like, that's fine, he's improved to that point, but he can't enter scaled again. And that's the problem, is they need to then move on, they need to push forward. And if you are RX in the Open, for me, then you are an RX athlete. Like it's
We can't go through all the entrants and look at where they finished in the Open.
no, it's impossible. Yeah, we can't do it, but that's where like
Let them do the work, and then they can do the work and send it in.
But
Just not abusive.
Yeah,
If they want to look at where someone finished in the Open and then ping it over,
yeah.
then you can call them out. But
As a competition,
We
we can't know who every single person is and what they've
Absolutely
done, and
not.
we can't go through their Instagrams and check that have they done a handstand push-up before, have they like. But people have asked us to do that. That's what people. But if everyone's honest with themselves, they should enter the appropriate category. If people should know where they're at. Everyone knows where they're at, really. And if you speak to your coach, they should know where you're at as well, I think. But I think other than that, the only other thing that I wanted to talk about was in terms of general movement standards and moving forwards, what do we want to see from athletes who enter our comps, who are entering our qualifiers? Like, what tips, advice have you got? What things do you see all the time that shouldn't be happening that we do see?
Simple movements done wrong.
Yeah.
For me, just consistency with simple movements, going back to basics and looking at the basic movement standards of CrossFit. Yes, we know you can do a ring muscle up. Yes, we know you can do a bar muscle up. But can you squat to full depth? Can you lock your arms out with a kettlebell over your head? Just basic things like that that need to be ironed out. And like I say, we haven't really come up against massive issues when we've been judging, but there are a few anomalies where I don't know if it's just down to lack of movement standards being coached, or they physically can't do it, or they haven't done it for that long that they can't do it.
Yeah.
But those are the things for me that need to be picked up.
And some people are great. I've done it in the qualifiers where we've had to penalise people and give them penalties. Then they've messaged saying, "What was that penalty for?" I've told them, they've been like, "Oh, thanks."
Yeah.
Like, and they've took it on. Like, and the majority of people take it on the chin. Like, cheers, yeah. I messed up. The lasses who won our pairs comp, they'd messaged and they'd had penalties, and they're like, "Thanks very much. We haven't been called out on this before. We'll sort it out."
Yeah.
Came back for the finals. They smashed it. They won.
I mean, it goes back to like, don't just assume you know what the standard is. We say what we're looking for in the videos, so just kind of don't think, oh yeah, I know that, I'll move on. Like, watch the videos and then I don't know, it's there in front of you what we're looking for.
Listen to the briefs on the day. We only ask for half an hour of your time in the morning, just so you're aware of what's going on for the day, what we're looking for, what the judges are looking for, what we're expecting from you as an athlete. Just pay attention for that half an hour of the day, and then go and chat to your friends, work out what you're going to do for the day, work out what you're going to do team-wise, how the dynamic's going to work, but just listen for that half an hour so we know what's going on for that day.
Yeah. But I think that's great. I think we've covered quite a lot there, and hopefully you guys will find it useful, because you see us on comp day, we are stressed, we're running about, but it gives you a little bit of an insight as to why this is. Yeah, I'm stressed. Less stressed every time.
Stresses
Yeah.
as well.
But hopefully you guys get a bit more of an insight into what's going on, why we say the things we do, and where the things are going, especially with the categories. And I know it might not have cleared anything up, but the mindset side of it should have. You should know where you are at, and you should be able to make an informed decision on what category to enter and compete in.
Just make a list. Make a list of movements. Make a list of all the movements you can think of. Tick them off. If you can do them RX, that should give you a good understanding where your fitness level's at.
And if you can't do a ring muscle up, start practicing. Like that, for me, like that's what you should be doing. You should then aspire to do it. And it doesn't. You could be an amazing rower, but everything else, but you can't do a ring muscle up. You're still an RX athlete. You just have a weakness. Laura Hovarth can't do handstand push-ups very well. She came second in the world at the games. Like, she's working on that weakness. She's not a scaled athlete. She just needs to work on that weakness. You know what I mean? I think that's one big thing.
Rich Fulham couldn't climb a rope.
Yeah, he's still second in the world. Like, and then went on to be the greatest. Better than that.
Yeah, really.
No, I don't know. Right, anyway, thanks very much, guys. And we're going to do a guest workout today as well, so keep an eye out for that.